personality, EIP3, loads of personality tools. And I'm not going to be talking about personality at all. I'm going to be talking about psychometrics and inclusion from a perspective. Is that working? Okay, is it working? Brilliant. So I hope this is useful. My goal is just to kind of have a general discussion of a couple of example organizations. So I'm speaking on the behalf of Talergy, but actually the people who are genuinely delivering it are the organizations that we work with. They're the ones who have to do all the hard work around dealing with stakeholders, dealing with all the types of questions that they have to deal with. And as a consultant, you kind of turn up and you demand lots of stuff, but you don't actually have to deal with the repercussions that they have to deal with. So I just want to say, I'm speaking on behalf of them, but I also want to kind of make this an opportunity to discuss inclusion from a much more practical way. Just reflecting on the fact that inclusion is something that most of us, if we're using psychometrics, we're using tools, it's a goal. We want to make sure that any person we interact with using these tools are getting the value out of it, are not biased in any way. And to Kate's point earlier, irrespective of how wonderful and all the things that we're going to talk about around making tests more inclusive, there is always going to be bias. But the key here, and the way I'm talking about it, is like, how do we do everything we can to reduce that as much as we can? So what I'm planning to do, why inclusion? I think most people know why inclusion, but I'm going to cover that. I'm going to talk about a model called the Foundations of Fairness. Now, this really is just I wouldn't describe it as a bastardization, but it is just using good IO psychology, occupational psychology, business psychology, work psychology terms, and hopefully something in there is useful thinking about whatever practice you have. I'm taking the focus on assessment, but hopefully there's something there if you're thinking about development programs, thinking about assessment programs, there's something in here around that toolkit which might be useful. And then I'm going to talk about 2 example projects where we've implemented this approach. And I think the key thing to kind of highlight, the takeaway, and I think it was really clear in Grace's presentation earlier, is that actually the key thing around all of this, around trying to make things more inclusive, is ultimately about continuous improvement. And we do use tools, but as a person who develops those tools, if you're a client of those tools, you should be demanding what you're going to do next. How are you going to improve it? What are you doing that's going to enhance whatever you're doing? Because they're living things, psychometrics, and they should evolve with the usage that people have and also with the society which we find ourselves in. So why inclusion? I can talk about this for hours, but ultimately it comes down to 3 core things in my view. Greater objectivity. At the heart of a recruitment process is about ensuring that it's as objective as possible. Is a person who's getting the job role going to be the best person to that job role, irrespective of the demographic they come from, socioeconomic status they come from, whatever background they come from? Are they the right person? So it's all about objectivity at the heart. And when you think about occupational psychology, that's really what we're driving with all of it, is how can we just see past the nonsense and actually get into what is that person about and are they right for that particular job? Greater business value. Ultimately, if you have more diverse and inclusive organizations, research shows that they're typically more effective. We all know that, if we just do one thing in one way, at some point it's going to get unstuck. So having people around you who are able to see things in different ways to you is always going to be valuable. And ultimately, it's going to deliver better impact in terms of inclusive environments. People are going to perform better, and they're going to be more motivated, and they're more likely to work as a team. So we all know about, when organizations aren't working as a team, if people are in a sort of what we refer to as a survival mindset, they're less likely to be working effectively with each other. So what is this model and why does it matter? So the model that I'm going to talk through, and the way I'm going to talk through it is by giving a couple of examples, is all about a cyclical approach to designing and delivering whatever program that you're delivering. And it's starting from a first stage of aligning, trying to achieve something meaningful, analyzing to see if it works, and acting based on that information, and then ensuring that you align and carry on as planned. And this model ultimately is about strategically doing all the things as IO psychologists, as business psychologists, as work psychologists, is recognizing that if you're working on a project with a client, when you start the project is the moment where you can actually get the most impact, because that's when the client is going, right, what are you going to do for me? That's when they're asking, what's the validity? That's when they're asking, is there any adverse impact? And as the relationship carries on, typically those questions start to peter out. And that's why it's really important. The reason why I find this really useful is kind of starting off strategically going, okay, where do we want to go, and how do we going to ensure that we deliver that? So first, ensure that we're aligned to their goals. Recognize that you need to involve diverse stakeholders, and that diverse stakeholder group could be from a range of ERGs, be it any level of diversity. I know when we talk about the subject, it's complex, but ultimately getting people from lower socioeconomic groups, ensuring there's a neurodiverse group, ensuring that their ethnic minorities are involved in the process from a very outset, ensuring that whatever you're doing is representative of a community that you want to support, and also, are you ensuring that you're asking the right questions early on? So ultimately, are you delivering something which has a group of stakeholders who can question you and make sure that whatever you're delivering is in line with what you're hoping to achieve? Identify what sort of accommodations you need. Again, reasonable adjustments, accommodations. These are things which shouldn't be a second thought. It should be part of initial design. What am I delivering? How am I going about it? Who's going to need support at a later stage? And am I ensuring that they're getting the right support from the very beginning? And then whenever you join any project, this organization hasn't just appeared from nowhere. There's going to be organizational data, there's going to be previous experiences, there's going to be previous suppliers, and those previous suppliers or organizations or whatever they've done previously probably was pretty good. Most organizations, if they are doing high volume recruitment, have done something solid before. And if not, then that gives you an even bigger canvas. Nevertheless, it's always worth asking those questions, because you can learn prior to you move forward what worked, what didn't work, what can we do better. Achieve. Now, Nikita said, don't use the word science. I'm going to use science. Scientifically science. But like, ultimately, achieving is all about going, right, what am I trying to do? Okay, I could use a psychometric tool. There's a whole host of psychometric tools I could use, but are they appropriate? Are they the right fit for what I need to do? And actually, I forgot the most important thing, job analysis. The most boring part of any project, but the most important, is job analysis. And I'm actually lying. I love job analysis because you get the most, you get the tea. You get to know what's going on, and people share stuff, which is really interesting. But ultimately, that means that it guides everything that you do next. If you do good job analysis, you know what are the characteristics which are important, what do I need to measure, how do I need to measure it, and what do I do next? And then based on that, then you go, okay, how do I do this? So research is constantly moving forward. Okay, what am I about to use? Is there anything in the literature which is useful, which I can deploy? Are there any organizations that you see as being great? What are they doing? Could they do that you're not doing? Could you do it better? So looking at this is about looking at the sort of scientific foundations, and this is a personal, really important thing for me: accessibility. So accessibility is something that, with the new legislation, with WCAG kind of becoming more mandatory, has been something which ultimately, in my view, is sometimes an afterthought, especially if you're working with people within the software teams, etc. They're like, oh, we've achieved accessibility because it works with these assistive technologies. But what it really is, when you think about accessibility, do I have the right materials? Is there materials available for any users? Is there practice information? Is there stuff in there that's beyond just having a technology system which works with things like Dragon and JAWS and et cetera, et cetera. So make sure that your technology works, but also make sure, what am I delivering, and is it working in the way that it should do? And think about the user. Like, at the end of the day, whatever we're doing, if it's delivering feedback, if it's working with someone, ultimately it's a person. So how do we ensure whatever we're delivering kind of meets the needs of those people? Analyze. Are we getting information from the project? Are we getting candidate feedback? Are we seeing trends? And are we doing fairness analysis as we go along? was ultimately, Grace kind of alluded to, right, let's look at the adverse impact. Okay, this is not looking good. Okay, that's not the approach. It's going, right, what's going on? Is it working or not? If it is, what can we do to enhance it? And then what can we do to act upon it? And hopefully by having these sort of 4 questions, it comes at the very beginning, kind of goes, right, it gives you that mindset of, am I asking the right questions? Am I building in time to analyze? And I'm building time to say, actually, we're going to go live with this particular initiative or project or development program. But we at some point are going to review where we're at, and then we're going to try and improve it in some way. And having that as kind of like almost the starting point of a conversation, the client themselves or the organization themselves are much more open to it versus kind of being kind of waiting halfway through and be like, oh, is this working or not? If you start off, you get the right information early and you have time to improve when it's appropriate. So, examples of projects in action. So, because I'm not with my colleagues in the different organizations, I'm not explicitly going to say the names of the organizations, but I think it's pretty obvious what they are. So I'm just going to carry on. So this is a project. So I'm going to talk through 2 examples. So one is a large public sector organization. Who could that be? And what they wanted to do, and I hate I'm not going to use the word. Sometimes it's, oh, we're going to revolutionize. No, we're not. We're just making things slightly better. But what we tried to do was make things slightly better. So in order to achieve that, we talked to 27 professions, 98 departments, identify what wasn't working about their process up till now. There was actually a pretty bad baseline at that time of 88% of vacancies had some form of adverse impact, which is a large number. But they were so keen to ensure that that was addressed. And I think everything they've done since is such a good demonstration of how they've constantly evolved, constantly improved. And they also looked at the analysis of a range of tools, so personality tools, judgment tools, ability tools. And through this, they got senior sponsorship to actually go, no, we're going to take this issue and we're going to take it and deal with this issue actively. So through that, we aligned, ensured that, and we asked for all the things that we want. Can we get job performance data? Can we have access to the right people? Do we have the right stakeholders from out? And as a consequence of that, we were able to get support from auditors to make sure that our systems were accessible. We had a group of psychologists who were representative, and we had 74 internal experts, which again were hopefully from a good range of backgrounds to ensure, so 42% from the diversity networks. We also, this is the science bit, we also looked into the scoring. How can we make the scoring more likely to have lower group differences? So we looked at the literature. There was some literature which highlighted that rating approach was better than other approaches when it came to SJT design. We also identified an IIT approach, which was making sure that all the assessments were parallel as much as possible versus adaptive, which, like Kate, I have certain question marks, but I do think that IIT is really useful for parallel versions of assessments. And then we also made sure the tests were multimedia. So to Grace's point, does this feel representative? When I take this assessment, is this representing me? And we made sure that the actors that are involved were sufficiently representative of a range of backgrounds and regions, because again, it's the UK, and so we want to make sure that we're representative of all the countries within the UK. And then we started piloting with 4,000 employees, and we also had 10,000 working adults. And this was just at the beginning. So what did we do next? So we analyzed, and so I'm kind of boiling this down in a way which isn't actually indicative of a direct journey. It is in line with what I described, a continuous improvement. So we've been working with the organization for 9 years now. And through that process, we've iterated, we've reviewed, we've improved. And this is some of the research. We've also looked specifically, so when we started off, hands up, we looked at disability status, but we didn't look at neurodiversity in the level of detail that we wanted. It was 2016. It wasn't the top priority for our organization. Disability from an assistive technology point of view was, but then since then we've done manually categorized all the data that we collected. So 15,000, so my poor colleague had to go through 15,000 responses and then put them into different groups. And based on that, we were able to do analysis to kind of see, is it working for those neurodiverse candidates? The positive news was yes. It was still, the group differences were much lower than, and we've got some paper out there which hopefully will put this in more detail. So in terms of ACT, I just wanted to detail all the different things we did. So 2018, we added BSL videos. So again, to make it feel more inclusive, we added BSL videos so that if anybody was seeing the assessment, they had the option of audio description and BSL signer. Then we had reviews with specific groups, making sure the test worked as appropriately. We also looked at the norms. Are they representative? 2023 is when we did neurodiversity research. We did an audit of their recruitment processes across their recruitment process, seeing what was working, what wasn't. And right now, we're starting a technical review and an assessment audit. And I think in terms of the impact, we saw 42% reduction in shortlisting costs, 69% drop in recruitment complaints post-rollout, and a 31% increase in candidate satisfaction with online tests. And since then, they've completed over 5 million tests. So again, hopefully a really good example of putting this into action. In terms of the next project, so this is with a large public safety organization who support many public safety organizations across the country. They may wear hats. They may tell you off if you do something naughty on the streets. In effect, what we did, so we've been working with a range of these organizations across the country, but actually they wanted to work nationally. So we're working with a national organization which supports those organizations. And what was great about this was because at the very beginning of the initiative, we already had loads of data of what worked, what didn't work. And through this, we then looked at the data. So we engaged volunteers, we did job analysis, and we did many things for early considerations. And the thing which I'm not gonna go into all the detail because I'm conscious of time, but the thing which I do want to highlight is this approach of, so again, when you design any test, what I always want to advocate is always have more content than you're going to use finally, because you have the opportunity to make those decisions about improvements, be it how it fits, be it content that you think works really well because you've done trial samples, but actually there's always, when it hits the candidate, it might hit differently. And so as a consequence of this project, we have trialed a version of the assessment. So it's a personality assessment, it's an SJT, and we have more content than we plan to use. And the goal of that is, so once we have all the candidate data, we can then make it even better and reduce the group differences even further. So we have a pre-launch validation, we do a post-launch validation, and we have a commitment to iteration. And those being those sort of cornerstones of doing this in a way which I think practically works. So what are the key themes across the project? So I picked two, but there's multiple projects where we've tried to apply this. Recognize that inclusion and validity needs to be asked for at the very beginning, because when the project starts to move forward, all those big questions that are asking right up front when you've won the work start to dissipate. So and they start to become more relaxed about those outcomes. But if you ask early, they're more likely to give you what you need. Accessibility is not just about technical accessibility. So it's not just about being able to work on assistive technologies. It is a mindset around how do you make your process as accessible to everyone. And it's not just about disability, it's about everyone. So am I giving the right information? Because when we reflect on some of our assessments, socioeconomic status, to me, is the unsaid challenge. When we talk about ethnicity, we talk about, it's actually the factor which we don't talk about enough is socioeconomic status. But a lot of people who are of lower socioeconomic status, this will be the first time they've ever done any kind of psychometric. So recognizing that and making sure that's accountable from the very beginning. And data. Use data at scale to make sharper decisions. Data is there. We've talked a lot about data today, but actually, when I look at data, it's a guide. It's not perfect, but it helps you make better decisions. And so see what's working, what's not working, and ensure that you'll also, again, have the right demographics being actually measured throughout your process. So again, this is something which I think sometimes gets dropped. is that the reason why neurodiversity is a question that we're asking ourselves right now is because nobody collected data on the subject. Because people are terrified of collecting that data because they're concerned of what's the implications. And actually, we need to collect that data in order to make those improvements. So I'm going to leave off with what is a takeaway. Make inclusion intentional. Involve diverse voices. Design with inclusion at the very beginning. Prioritize fairness, usability, and user experience. Look at data and don't be scared to make decisions to improve it, and deal with the repercussions, be it you have to halt the process and start the process again, because it's worth it. And act. Make sure that you're not just doing stuff, make sure that you're doing stuff and putting it into action and making sure that that improves, because every time you do that, you learn something new and it helps you improve the next one. So thank you very much for your time.
Question, thought, reflection, would like a pumpkin cake. Yes, 1 sec, let me get you the mic.
Thank you very much. Larissa Boiani. I am heading at Sanofi Center for Expertise for Talent Assessments. And before working for Sanofi, I was working for a consulting firm specializing on simulation assessments. And in my previous role, and also in my current role at Sanofi, what I'm seeing is that the team that is specializing on all topics related to DI is actually outside of our talent organization and works quite independently from talent organization. That was also my experience previously in consulting when working with other large organizations. So my question for you, but also for everyone else in this room, what is your experience with that? Before we talked about the miracles and the all amazing things that happen when talent team works closely with people analytics team. Now here I'm again curious, how does actually DI team and talent teams work together? What have you seen that is great? Challenges?
People next to you, just a few minutes, and then we'll come back to that. And Jesse, we see you. So your question is definitely coming. Don't worry. Everything's fine. We're just sharing ideas. All good. Oh, which book did you get?
I'm getting another one.
Which one? Was it Don't Be Yourself?
This was so
Oh, let's get it signed.
okay. Yeah.
Let's go, Lily. 1 second. Let's go get it signed. Do you have a pen?
Sorry.
Do you have a pen with you?
Maybe.
Excellent. Teamwork. Oh, yes, absolutely. It's all right. We'll get one. Ah, teamwork. We have black and blue. 1 second. Let's go. Sorry, guys. Coming through. No, it's still than you. Of course, we have you. Yes, we did. Thomas, would you do the honors for Lily? We have blue or black. I want to give you a choice. No. You're gonna stay here. Jesse has a question for you. You're not getting down so easily. Okay, good people. So, oh, sorry, online. Okay. Hey, Anybody like to share? With Irina, right? Marisa, sorry. Okay, when DNI and oxides work well together, any examples? Great.
Did you say DNI and oxides or DNI and HR?
Yeah.
Okay. Most of the time, DNI teams sit within HR teams anyway, especially in a big, well, in most organizations I've ever worked in. So they inherently should be feeding in to selection anyway, if it's done well, and it's like a feed, there's a cycle of communication, and then that kind of like filters down to the rest of the other departments, especially if there's like an EDI steering group across the organization, or ERGs or affinity groups. They all feed in to the DNI team, and that team feeds into recruitment. When it comes to org psychs, I mean, I can't speak for that, because usually if an org psych team is embedded within the organization, I'm not sure how much communication they have with EDI and talent anyway. I know it should happen, but I don't really have any examples of it happening in my experience.
Well, there's always time for you. If we can make friends with people analytics, surely we can make friends with DNI. Jesse, you have a question. You're
Yes. Question for Ali, please. I'm sorry, I can only hear half of what's happening. So we use Talogy products a lot, and I know that you've done a fair amount of research into ADHD and dyslexia. I'm wondering, have you done any research, or is there research planned specifically to do with autism and situational judgment tests? Excuse me.
No. So in this research we did for the civil service, God, I said it. Basically, we had, it was the biggest groups that we looked at were autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and the group differences on the selection process that we created. It had like a D value of 0.2, which is still lower than expected, and dare I say, as an ethnic minority, much lower than the group differences for ethnic minorities. So it was something we looked at specifically. I've also done some research specifically looking at group differences on SJTs. And what we found is not so much there's a difference in performance on SJTs, but there is a difference in the level of anxiety that certain candidates experience when they complete it. So I don't think, based on what we did, it was a sample of about 50 people. They completed the anxiety measure, they completed the SJT. The scores were actually slightly better for the ASD group, but that level of anxiety they were experiencing was higher. Hence why, when I was talking about how important accessibility is from a practical point of view, it is, sorry, I'm looking at Jesse. I realize there's other people in the room. From a practical point of view, what we found was that's why providing more materials, reducing anxiety through familiarization, for me is quite critical, because even though you won't reduce it, given the circumstances, it being high stakes, you're going for a job, nevertheless, if someone feels more comfortable and has seen it, the likelihood of anxiety in my, again, it's more of a assumption, would be less. And so we do recognize that there needs to be something there to ensure that there's more familiarity with the tools. And it also, ASD is like any continuum. There are certain candidates with ASD where the continuum will be in a situation where SJT, so a group difference of 0.2 sounds good, but there will be candidates who have ASD who might really struggle with SJT. So I think that's my caveat around it.
perfect. I'm sure that Ali has alleviated some of our anxiety of dealing with diversity when it comes to assessment and making assessment more inclusive. So can we have a round of applause?